Good evening, everybody. I have read your practicum log number 2 and provided feedback in Typhon for you to review. And I've also reviewed your reflective exercise related to O'Brien's sub-themes for servant leadership. Let's talk just a moment about your Typhon logs. An area of opportunity for improvement for many of you is the section for self-reflection. Most of you have gotten the logistics correct and in enough detail in your supportive narrative section, that middle section. The next step is in that section, in your supportive narrative section, is not just tell your reader, whether it's me or Dr. Brown in 625 and 626, what you've experienced, the logistics, the who, what, when, where, and how. The next step is to integrate that into a meaningful experience. For you to be able to say, I was in this meeting and I thought this about this. I watched a leader behave in this way and I was surprised by that. I questioned a decision that was made in a meeting because I wasn't sure they were thinking about the patient's experience. All those are ways that you are reflecting on the experience you have. The rote experience of just going through the motions is not where we learn. We know that people learn best if their learning occurs in multiple domains of learning. A key component of your practicum log is accessing the affective domain. And all that means for your purposes is we want you to be thinking about your emotional feelings about the experiences you're having and be able to integrate them meaningfully in your world. If you are experiencing discourse in a professional setting in your practicum and you walk away feeling anxious and stirred up and you're frustrated by something, I want you to process that. I want you to be able to put that in a paragraph form and say, during this meeting, I was listening to all this conversation and these bits and pieces of information, and this is what I thought about it. This is a safe place. You can write whatever you want. I don't report anything to anybody. Well, you can't write whatever you want, within reason and professionally appropriate. I want you to be working towards self-reflection. It is great to have adequate detail to support your progression through your goal toward your goals and objectives, but you have to do the self-reflection, which is where the rubber hits the road. One thing I will encourage you to do, if you feel like you're doing that self-reflection and I'm giving you feedback that I'm not seeing it, put a small heading that just says self-reflection. And then I can read it in the context you believe you're sending it. And then we can talk about a way to improve. Maybe it's your writing or how you're communicating your ideas. Let's work through that because it's an important part of your practicum experience. So many of you are having such great experiences and are being mentored so well. As a practicum instructor, I get a little anxious having all of my little chickadees out in the world, and we literally have students across the world, and not knowing who your preceptors are. So I really have to trust in God's providence and God's sovereign hand that He is placing you guys in safe, effective, growing nests. So it is validating and comforting for me to read about your experiences and see how you're being grown and mentored and supported. So I appreciate the efforts you're doing to convey that. One of my favorite assignments to grade is the one that you all wrote for O'Brien's sub-themes. I love it so much. It's one of those assignments that I wait until I've got all the other things graded, and it's one of those things that I sit and I just read more for my own insight in learning who you are and what your experiences are. So really lots of really good ideas that you shared. So many of you were able to connect O'Brien's sub-themes with some very personal experiences, whether it was holding the hand of someone dying. Many of you talked about the loss of elderly clients. Several of you talked about the loss of young adults or even newborns or in utero premature deaths. All of those things are profound. I was equally taken with those of you that just sat down and held a hand and let someone cry, or you forgive me, I can't remember who it was. It'll come to me in a moment. Wrote about a patient who had an NG tube and was in PO for 2 weeks, and the smell of carts going by with food and how stressful that was for that client. And this nurse made critical thinking steps to figure out, how can I provide this client comfort? As simple as using a diffuser that changed the smell in her room to something that was comforting, so that the food wasn't stressful for the client. Those simple acts of kindness, those simple things sometimes can change the trajectory of care for our clients as much as the big ones. Sometimes we're so busy in the task and the doing of being a bedside nurse leader or a preceptor or a clinical nurse leader or a director that we forget that it is often the small things that make the most difference. So, it spanned the gamut of, major life events to small moments of kindness. All of those things tuck beautifully into O'Brien's sub-themes of servant leadership. When we are serving others, we lead them as well. One of your classmates did such a beautiful job with her conclusion. This is Kim's conclusion. She wrote that Kimball and Bamford and Wade state that compassion is the precursor to active listening and demonstrate through one being fully present in the moment. For an individual to display compassion implies that they have the capacity to acknowledge the patient's suffering. When a nurse is mindfully present, quiet and compassionate, they are able to emit a powerful feeling of reassurance, comfort, and calm others. With all the suffering in the world, nurses are in the position to influence sufferers with a compassionate attitude. We may never know the complete purpose for her client's experience. However, we do know that God has a plan and it is perfect. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1. Kim did a beautiful job wrapping her arms around the concept of compassion and being fully present. And compassion really is the underpinning of what O'Brien was writing about, of being a wounded healer, of understanding what it meant to have a higher purpose and calling from God, what it meant to cross over and listen with your heart. All of those things are done through the compassion. So I truly appreciate Kim's beautiful wording there and really articulating what compassion should look like from a nursing standpoint. So exceptional work. Thank you for your transparency. Sometimes this assignment can stir up a little bit of emotion for students because they're talking about personal things and memories. So I'm grateful for your willingness to kind of expose yourself and share things personally that have influenced your practice. It's one of those times you kind of wish I'd had a front row seat to what you were doing. Okay, let's talk real briefly about next week. Next week you have a discussion board. It's going to feel like a light week because the discussion board's pretty straightforward. You're going to do some information on examples of advocating, and then there's another part 2 that looks at the essential qualities of will. And both of those are really straightforward. The reason week 7 is not as detailed or not as heavy workload-wise is because I want you to start working on week 8. Week 8 has your final paper, and it's 200 points, so it's a pretty heavy load on your assignment. What I'd like you to do is to read through the assignment. I'm not going to be looking for you to do anything, so if you're going to wait until week 8 before you do week 8 assignment, I get that. But if you are a work ahead trying to use your time and maximize so week 8's not crazy, here's what I would suggest. Week 8 has you comparing the 10 spiritual rules of the road and the nursing servant leader behavioral themes from O'Brien. So you have 2 bodies of work, one from Porter, O'Grady, and Malik, and one from O'Brien. This week, my encouragement would be for you to really read through these 2 authors' work, take some blank sheets of paper and write them down, write brief summaries of what they mean, and then start looking for common themes. You're asked to compare and contrast. So comparing and contrasting means that you're going to write about similarities in these 2 authors' work, and then you're going to write to me about differences in these authors' work. That is comparing and contrasting. You will be making a misstep if you spend 10 pages summarizing these authors' work. That's not the assignment. I'm saying that because I see that Often enough, I'm telling you, don't do it. If you spend a week really thinking about these themes and really thinking about how they're similar and dissimilar, you're going to go into the paper strong. You're going to do a brief introduction, and then you're going to get into the meat and potatoes of the work. I am a visual person, and I'm also a kinesthetic learner, so I really like writing things out. I will sticky note things all over the place. I work better if I read both works and I make lists and I compare in writing. You do it however you want, but it is important that you analyze these works and you synthesize the content that's being offered. If all you do is submit a summary, your week 8 is not going to end well. And because it's an important assignment, not only is it important for you to understand the process and the graduate level skill of critical thinking, synthesis, and analysis of two important bodies of work, content wise, it's really important. It gets to the heart of what it means to serve others in a leadership position. It sets a framework for future practice. So, content, it's a blueprint. From a graduate success level, it's I can think critically and I can analyze information and synthesize it in a meaningful way. Plan for week 8 to be less challenging by doing a little bit of the work ahead of time. If you have questions or concerns, touch base. I know we are moving and that summer is in full swing. Many of you are working moms and dads of the 4-legged kind and the 2-legged kind, trying to tuck in vacations and kids' schedules and people schedules. I'm with you. Well, except I only have 4-legged babies. All of my 2-legged babies grew up and left town. But I get being busy. Let me know how I can pray for you, how I can support you. We are entering week 7. You have 2 more weeks. And because your next 2 courses are practicum courses, unless you're taking an elective, you have 8 weeks off. Which my prayer is that you are making plans to go on vacation, to do something fun, or maybe just catch up on some sleep, or clean the dust bunnies under your bed, or make a home cooked meal, or maybe just take a really good nap. Whatever it is, I hope you're making plans. Touch base and let me know how you are. If you have questions or concerns about feedback, ask now before we get too far into the next 2 weeks, so that you can make improvements as necessary. Have a great week. It is, I guess it's almost 10 o'clock here in Roanoke, and I have to go walk puppies. I hope you guys have a good evening. Touch base.